Hello everybody, welcome back to Anglo Election Insights, where today, after my previous video where I detailed Labor's path to 87 seats, a thumping majority and completely routing the coalition, for this video I'm going to flip the narrative and present the most bullish, realistic, or somewhat realistic case for a coalition majority which sends Labor packing back to 2013 seat levels and sees them winning back key seats from the crossbench, and also sees the Greens as an unexpected beneficiary. So let's dive in, but before we do, I just want to somewhat justify some of my theories here. Firstly, there's been some reporting and internal rumblings within the Liberal Party that preferences from minor right-wing parties, particularly One Nation, who seems to be attracting the vast majority of that vote, instead of breaking sort of 55-45, 60-40 like they did in 2022 when the Liberals were in government and there was a mood for change, there has been some thought that perhaps those preference flows will increase to more like 70, 80, and according to JWS research, even 90%. So sort of similar to how Greens preferences would flow to Labor. Of course, you might remember JWS research from some great bangers like the Liberal Party primary in Curtin is going to be 56% and Labor's primary in Bullwinkle will be 13%. So of course you can take that with a pretty healthy pinch of salt. But some of the seats where this is apparently most notable in is in Whitlam, as well as Wirrawa. They're also saying that in the seat of Ryan, apparently 10% of the vote is going to minor right-wing parties, which seems very high for me in that type of electorate, and the preferences are flowing 85%. So I actually have more of a problem with the 10% primary figure than the 85, because that's going to be a Liberal Greens contest or LNP Greens contest. So I probably would expect One Nation preferences to flow very strongly to the Liberals, but I don't expect them to rack up 10% of the vote. And then the article kind of goes on and talks about a few other seats, Gorton, Hawke, McEwen, all the classics. Whereas at the same time, so that's probably more affecting your outer suburban mortgage belt, sort of high cost of living, high commute time seats. And then that's the coalition's theory that particularly in Victoria, they've got like a bit of a pathway through Labor heartland. But at the same time, I'm seeing there's an increasing sort of scrutiny on this potential tax on unrealised gains for superannuation. And if we cast our minds back to 2019, the whole sort of issue of franking credits and negative gearing reform, as well as the sort of the future of coal, were key points of sort of distrust in electing Labor under Bill Shorten. And I wonder if, for this scenario, I guess I'm saying that perhaps some of these more higher income, wealthy, sort of formerly blue ribbon areas could begin to drift back to the Liberal Party just based on this issue. So just some food for thought, not necessarily saying that is exactly how it's going to play out, but some spice for the recipe. So let's get back to the map. Here I have 83 seats for the coalition, 55 for Labor, and then 5 for the Greens, and then 7 for the rest of the crossbench. And I've just realised that, yeah, there we go. Beautiful. So it's 4 of the kind of tealy type independents and 3 other, who I'm sort of classifying as others. So that's Katter, Rebecca Sharkey and Dai Lee. Let's jump right in. So starting up north, as we often do, we've got both territory seats swinging to the Liberals. Basically turnout and the underlying trend hurting Labor in the more regional, rural-based seat of Lingiari, whereas in Solomon, a big swing against Labor, the splitting of the left-wing vote amongst the Greens and the Teal Independent, and a lack of preference discipline, as well as sort of increased focus on issues like crime and cost of living allows the coalition to come up the middle and win that one. The changing demographics of Leichhardt allow them to keep it safe. And then all across regional Queensland, they are doing exceptionally strongly. In this scenario, I think the changing demographics of Blair mean that it's probably not quite on the table this time, but with a potential redistribution coming up for next cycle, and being on a wafer-thin margin with a long-term member who might be retiring by then, it would certainly be on their target list for 2028. But as we go through central Brisbane here, no problems on the sunny coast or the Gold Coast, none whatsoever. Groom, right, it's all fine. Dixon holds, Longman holds, Petrie's safe, Bonner holds as well. As for Labor, they suffer a bit of a swing in Moreton and in Lilly, and the Greens, they miss out on Ryan due to the LNP overperforming, but I don't think, even in this scenario, the LNP has enough legs to actually take the seat of Brisbane. But you could argue that one's line ball if the LNP is performing really strongly in metropolitan Brisbane, especially if it's the Greens that make the count. And if the LNP is taking votes off Labor, I would imagine that the Greens would make the count. So that one could be neck and neck. Griffith, the LNP will knock Labor out of the count. And then similarly, in the seat of Richmond, the high Nats primary vote will come at the expense mostly of Labor, and the Greens will be the major beneficiary, able to enter the two candidate preferred and win the seat narrowly on Labor preferences. No problems in these regional seats for the coalition. They retain Cowper on a similar margin. As with Calare, Hunter, with strong preference flow from One Nation, they're able to narrowly take it. The Nationals are able to narrowly take it off the Labor Party. Similar in Patterson, where centre-right, independent Philip Penfold and One Nation preferences deliver it to the Liberals, and they make Shortland and Dobell marginal. They narrowly win Robertson and make Macquarie and Eden Monaro down here much more marginal as well. We'll kind of zoom in on central Sydney here. Barawa is safe. They hold off a teal challenge in Bradfield and retake Bennelong. I've got them retaking McCullough off Sophie Scumps and making both Warringah and Wentworth marginal teal holds. Labor with no real problems south of the harbour until you get to Banks and Hughes, where the Liberals increase their margins. Labor do narrowly hang on in Reid, but not quite in Parramatta. Greenway becomes a marginal, as does MacArthur. Daly hangs on in Fowler relatively easily, and the Liberals are able to win on preferences in Werriwa. Moving a little bit further south, I also have the Liberals safe in Hume and just scraping home in Whitlam. So this would be probably like the 82nd or 83rd seat, just based on the potential for preferences from the minor right parties and independents to split the Labor vote and deliver preferences strongly to the coalition there. I have them flipping Gilmore on the strength of Andrew Constance's sort of personal appeal. I still have Labor safe in the ACT because even in this scenario, I don't think there's a great deal of change in vote intention in the Canberra area, and it might mean that the Greens or the Independent in Bean failed to make the two candidate preferred, which would allow Labor to win on safe margins. I have Indi becoming a much more marginal teal hold. The Nats holding their seats and also making a surprise challenge in Bendigo but falling short. The Liberals would hang on in Monash. They would extend their lead in Casey. They would hang on just fine in Flinders as well as Latrobe. And then zooming in a little bit on Melbourne, they make Holt a marginal. The issue of crime and the preference flows in Dunkley are enough for them to overcome a pretty large margin. In Bruce, I have heard reports that there are some pretty high levels of support for both One Nation and the Liberal Party there, despite their candidate being a bit of a flop and, you know, a lot of different sort of revelations coming out about him. But I have them just narrowly winning. That would be another one. That would also be like maybe 81st seat or something like that. Aston flips back almost to a safe margin. They hang on in Deakin, and the personal appeal of Keith Wallahan in Menzies sees them win that seat relatively comfortably. I also have them winning in Chisholm quite narrowly, and also retaking both teal seats of Goldstein and Kooyong, again mostly owing to fear about Labor's plans to tax unrealised gains, and just in general some of the other sort of, I guess you could say, attacks on the wealthier class over the course of Labor's term, and some sort of 2019 era fear about that. Not necessarily saying it's going to happen, but for today's scenario, that's what I'm running with. The Greens win Melbourne, and they also win Macnamara because Josh Burns loses primary vote to the Liberals, but not to the point where the Greens can't overtake the Liberals on preferences in the final count. But in Wills, an overperformance by the Liberals sees Labor home on preferences there. Calwell becomes an interesting one where the Labor primary takes a big hit, but they do ultimately prevail. Same in Maribyrnong, but probably that one's a little bit safer for Labor actually on second thoughts. No problems in Fraser or Gellibrand, but a pretty big swing against in Lawler. Gorton, similar to Whitlam, another seat where preferences from the minor right allow the Liberals to scrape home in an empty seat. And then Hawke, big swings in areas such as Melton deliver this one to the Liberals, and McEwen, similar. I also have Corangamite as a surprise flip, with the local candidate really gelling with the older population there and harnessing some of the veteran vote and younger males as well, like sort of Gen Z, young millennial men. And hanging on to Wannon as well. So that's Victoria. That's really kind of where the coalition goes from sort of minority territory into a firm majority in this scenario. Looking at Adelaide, the two regional seats safe Liberal. They cut into the Labor margin in Boothby, but ultimately don't come out on top. And in Sturt, they're able to sandbag with a very slight swing towards them. But the big swings actually happen in seats such as Spence, Macon and Hindmarsh. And then jumping across to Perth, actually we better go and do Tassie first. So in this scenario, Andrew Wilkie is still safe in Clark. Labor still safe in Franklin because the Liberals make the two-party preferred, but they're able to flip lines narrowly despite the strength of the Labor candidate and the weakness of the Liberal one. They extend their lead in Bass and turn Braddon into a safe seat, if it's not already. And then in WA, the two big regionals, safe Liberal. Forest, they hold off an independent challenge. Canning, big swing to Andrew Hastie. And then in Bullwinkle, off the back of Nationals' preferences, the Liberals get home quite easily. And then in this scenario, I have Moore becoming relatively safe for the Liberals. I have them overturning Kate Cheney narrowly in Curtin and just pipping Labor in the seat of Tangney as well. Again, all three of those seats, some of those issues about like wealth management and tax that are sort of being floated as potential problems for Labor. In this scenario, they come to fruition in those three seats. And then Pearce, a big sort of mortgage belt area, big swing against Labor, and also the traditional marginals of like Hasluck, Swan and Cowan. They do see a big haircut for Labor, but they hang on. So that's it, guys. hopefully you guys enjoyed that one. I think more of you probably enjoyed the Labour Hopium one, but regardless, got to be fair to both sides. So I'll leave a link in the description for my actual prediction, which came out yesterday, and I'll be doing an updated one on Friday morning. So keep an eye out for that, guys. I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much.